Good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started here. I think we'll have some folks join us here in a minute, but let's go ahead and jump in. Thank you for joining me this morning on this TAPN Live conference. And these are interactive conferences, so please feel free to join in. If you have a question that you want to ask, you can raise your hand on your control panel to the right of your screen. You can indicate that you're raising your hand, and that'll alert me to unmute you. Initially, everybody is in the muted position, so we don't talk over each other, but I can unmute you at any time. But I highly encourage you to be interactive on this, and don't hesitate to ask any questions out there. So thanks again for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started. This is based on the 8 laws of double-digit profitability that was rolled out in the San Diego Super Meeting a couple of years ago, or a year before last. And so this is the second to the last one of the series. And we've taken these one at a time and talked about winning the day and being the right price and all those types of things that led up to that. So this is Law 7, which is living the 6 steps for service management. And we're going to talk about how that applies to you and your daily interactions with your technicians, and what does that mean. So again, here are the 8 laws. And let's move on. Signs of health. What are some of the things that we look at as leading indicators for our health? You know, things like blood pressure, cholesterol, weight, body mass index, and there's a ton of other things. When you go to a physical, they do a lot of things on you. Some of these things you can actually do yourself, blood pressure, some of those types of things. And you know, these are things that can be a pretty good indicator that there's trouble brewing, right? And so heart rate, you know, high blood pressure, they call it the silent killer. And much like in our business, we have vital signs that we should be looking at every day that we'll talk about, that we can look at as leading indicators for our business to see if we're running into trouble. So some of those might be, and there are many, I just put a few down here, but it could be conversion rate, how many dollars per task, how many tasks per call, different types of efficiency measurements. And again, a lot of these are technician, but if you're an install manager or sales manager, your metrics are going to be different. But the important thing is to look at these on a daily basis and know where we stand. What are our vital signs, you know, for our department, our company, our operation? Okay, could be leads, SPP sales, could be a lot of different things. So what would happen if we ignored or chose to be ignorant of our body's health indicators? Well, it's kind of we know that we're going down a slippery slope if we ignore those things. Things are going to be, bad things could happen to us if we ignore those. If we don't change our current way of conducting ourselves on a daily basis, maybe what we eat, do we work out, you know, are we eating the wrong things? Those things, some of these things might be able to be corrected to get us back on track. And much like our business, we want to look for those opportunities to get ourselves back on track, to make our departments healthy, to make our company healthy. So how do we do that? Not knowing isn't going to keep you healthy, okay? So, and one of the things I see a big shift on, especially with new Nexstar members when they first come on board, a lot of times new members are not necessarily, and this is more true probably with smaller, you know, operations, but a lot of times people are not really in tune with their financials. And I've had a lot of calls initially where we really had to struggle to get, you know, monthly income statements, for example. And as they're in Nexstar for a while and this starts progressing, then what we notice is that you know, people become more and more in tune. And when I know the shift has occurred is when people are sending me the P&L instead of waiting for me to ask for it. It's like, here it is, I got my numbers, got my financials, can we do a call, can we do a review? And that's really exciting stuff, because that tells me that we're becoming more in tune with our numbers and what those things mean. And as we continue down that path, we really focus on, you know, starting with the monthly and getting a budget in place, but we funnel that down to a point where we're looking at these numbers on a daily basis. We want to know where we're at on every single day. And that goes back to one of the previous laws, which was winning the day. Did we win the day? So if we took our annual budget and broke that down to a monthly, and then we took that monthly budget and broke that down to a day, did we hit that number? You know, whether it's a revenue goal, whether it's a sold hour goal, we want to know where we're at in relation to that, because that's a pretty good indicator of how the company's doing. But if we don't look at those, if we ignore them, or let's say it's bad, you know, we just choose not to look at it, that can be one of the worst steps of all. Kind of like having a no money or low money in your checking account, and you don't want to balance it because I don't want to know the answer. You know, it's a very stressful way to approach business. Okay. So you want to know your department's vital signs and check them daily. And so I put a snapshot up here of our coaching and tracking tool. So coaching and tracking tool is just one tool that you could use to measure, but it's again a daily example. And we talked about the importance of this on a previous call about doing this on a daily basis. You know, don't let this thing get out there for a week or two, or we're going to do this every 5 days and we'll catch it up. We want to get in tune with numbers, and I'll go back to some of my operation days. You know, when I was in Texas running locations, you know, we were early birds, you know, and it wouldn't be unusual for us to have our huddles at 5 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, you know, in different operations, and that's pretty extreme. But when we walked out of our huddle at 6 or 6:30 in the morning and walked through the warehouse, we knew where we were. We knew what we had done the previous day. We knew how much we had going in today from an installation standpoint. And there was a lot of benefit to that, because we could walk through the warehouse, and as we saw our technicians, we could congratulate them on a job well done, or tell me about that great job you had yesterday. Man, way to go. You know, that was a beautiful job. You know, so things like that. And it all feeds into the culture and the recognition. Okay. Do we have any questions so far? And again, this is an open forum. We're here to share information. I know it's a little awkward on the webinar format, but you're among friends here, so don't hesitate to raise your hand. We'll linger here for just a moment. Okay. Nothing so far? No questions? Okay. So what does it mean to live the 6 steps of the service system? And again, prepare, greet, explore, present, execute, and wrap up. And we talk about those and train to those for our service technicians quite often. But are there other areas of the business where this applies? And of course there are. So thinking about the 6 steps and how we approach our business, you know, preparing for that. You know, the greet step is going to look a little bit different, but, you know, exploring our numbers, presenting these things to our teams. How do we execute these things? And so this is a little bit different concept, but I'll invite you to think about the 6 steps of the service system. And how does that apply to management of our teams? You know, how you prepare for the things that you're going to do in your business, how you prepare your team is a great example of living the 6 steps. You know, how you greet your employees, how you greet your team, how you interact with them. That's important. You know, that would be much like feeds into the culture. The explore step could take several different forms. These could be considered as one-on-one interactions with your team. It could be the way that we talk to our employees, even in a casual basis, in a way that solicits information. So consider the 6 steps as it applies to your role as a leader within your organization. And mastering the execution of the 6 steps is kind of like a professional golfer mastering each one of their clubs. And I've got a fine Irish lad there, Rory McIlvaine. If you look at McIlroy, if you look at Rory, you know, that guy knows every club within his bag, and he's a master of it. You don't get to the tour without knowing how to master each one of your clubs. You know, you can't just wail on the driver and expect to be a great golfer. You can't be a great putter but not be a good driver. Or, heaven forbid, you find yourself in the rough or in the sand, you've got to know how to play those clubs effectively as well. And a lot of times from a training standpoint, sometimes members will get stuck on a step. Like and I'll get I'll get questions or feedback like, I really want my team to focus on handling objections. I think they really need to, be able to handle the objections and close the sale. And sometimes from a training standpoint, I'll see companies linger there. We're going to spend 2 months on this step. We're not moving forward until everybody gets this down, and that's kind of like getting caught in the sand trap. We want to continue to go through the 6 steps consistently and not get stuck in the sand on any one of those steps, okay? Because if you're so focused on one of those clubs, you're going to go backwards with the others. Does that make sense? So we want to continue to move through the service system from a training standpoint where we spend 3 to 4 weeks on each one of the 6 steps of the service system. And, not everybody's going to get it the first time through. They're not going to get it the second time through, maybe not even the third. But if we're consistently going through the steps, the lights will continue to go on. And this is a marathon, not a sprint. And that's a great way to look at your training approach, is where we're going to look at this thing consistently, have a very consistent approach, I like to say an intentional approach. We don't skip from the prepare step to the execute, or back to the greet, or forward to the wrap up. Having a very consistent approach with how we train and how we use our C1 videos, our wake up calls, our self-study guides, those types of things should have a very logical, systematic approach where this week's training lays the foundation for next week's meeting. Next week's meeting builds on what we learned this week, so it's a journey, but we want to maintain that continuity, and so that everybody gets better with each one of those steps. Okay, any questions on the training approach so far? All right, I think I have a question. All right. So the question is, going back one step, the daily numbers you showed are considered our source, but what if we use the traction, the EOS system? Matt, let's talk about that one, probably offline a little bit, but the daily numbers, whether you're using the EOS system or any type of measurement, I used coaching and tracking in the example, but it could also be maybe your dashboard on Service Titan. It could be a lot of different things, but you want to know where those are daily. So I think the EOS system certainly has the same focus as well. Good question. Any others? All right, perfect, thank you. All right, so supporting our team. And a couple of years ago, when this was rolled out at the super meeting in San Diego, we didn't have the training process workbook built yet, but it was already kind of the bones of that were starting to take shape. And so some of the things I'm going to reference here weren't released at that time, but we're going to talk about those a little bit more. And I don't want to turn this whole call into the training process workbook, because that's a pretty deep well in itself. But I do want to touch on some of the key points from the training process workbook. And I'm going to bring this up for a moment. So on the Nexstar website, the training process workbook is located under training and events, super meeting. And if you scroll down, come on. And as we scroll down through the content from the 2017 super meeting, and those of you, if you didn't know these are here, you can literally watch the presentations from the super meeting and get to experience some of what you may have missed there, okay? Or if you saw some of these presentations before, and I'd really like to revisit that again, this piece with Dan Friesen talking about the training process workbook, solid gold. So this is where the training process workbook is located. The other choice would be to go to your search window on your toolbar, and you can type in training process workbook. Okay, so this is just a fantastic source of information, and we're going to capture some of the high points here. Okay. All right, so supporting your team before they go to a training event, what does that mean? Okay, let's see. And the guide is also on the tap page on the Nexstar website. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. Perfect. All right. One of my favorite spots on the Nexstar site. All right. So supporting your team leading up to an event. And again, the best practices that we come up with in Nexstar, we don't dream these things up. We typically will learn from our membership and consolidate best practices that we see in action. And I'm going to give a shout out to Any Hour. A lot of the stuff that ended up being best practices for the training process workbook, came from some of the processes that Wyatt and his team executed at Any Hour, and they've got some pretty different things. So we're going to touch on some of those. So before the event, we want to sit down with the people that we're going to send to training and define their learning role. Okay, what is the learning role? And again, those are defined in that training process workbook, but how do we want them to be when they go away to training? Okay, and I'm going to kind of assume that we're going to send this technician or this CSR to St. Paul for a school. But the same philosophy applies, regardless of where you're sending them, or even if you're having an in-house one. We'll talk about that a little bit too. But sometimes for folks to get away and go to training to a different state, a different city is a pretty cool opportunity. But we want to make sure that they've got the right mindset. Are they there to learn? Are they there to go on a little vacation from the family? Or are they hostage? I didn't want to go to this training. Or the agitator, is this an opportunity for them to dust off their high school class clown schools, or be the mismatcher and be caustic in the training environment. So we want to talk about that role a little bit and define what does that mean. Okay. Identify the challenges. What are some of the challenges that this individual might face by going to this? Have they discussed this with their wives? Do they have any conflicts? Is this, we're asking him to go to a service system in St. Paul, and doggone, that falls on the same week that we have our family deer hunt every year, or something like that. I mean, these are things that are important to folks that we need to kind of talk through so that we understand, is this the right time to send this individual, or is the next one better? What's the right way to do this here? So identify the challenges that this individual that you're going to send to training may have and he might be struggling with, and make sure that he's got the support at home, that this isn't going to cause undue stress on his family members. We want to discuss the desired outcome of the training. And again, I know a lot of this stuff might sound like really common sense kind of stuff, but a lot of it goes unsaid. And that's why we talk about this. We want to have these conversations with these individuals before they go and have them verbalize, what is your desired outcome from this training? Why have you selected them? Why do you think I selected you to go to this training? Have that conversation, let them verbalize it, and you share your thoughts on this. And a really neat part of this best practice is also a cost analysis. Looking at the training that we're going to send you to is a significant investment. And what does that mean? And you can break this down by the cost of the tuition for the school that we're going to send you to, the airfare, the hotels, the meals, the taxis, everything involved in that training. And let's not forget about the 2 or 3 days where you're going to be away from the business. There's going to be a significant loss of revenue because, that's revenue you generate for the company. Okay. And why would we make that kind of investment in you? And it's really, sometimes that's a real, black and white opener to, my gosh, they really care about me, and these things need to be said because it has a lot of value to the culture. Pre-work plan. And the pre-work plan, and we're going to get to in just a moment, but it sets the stage for what are some of the things we going to do to prepare ourselves for this training? Do we need to go through the service system self-study guide or the sales self-study guide? Do we need to go through specific C1 videos or wake-up call that you identify for this individual? We're also going to define what types of goals we're going to set, but what does it mean to set goals? Okay, and for a lot of folks, setting goals is not something that they've done a lot of, or maybe it comes naturally. So when we talk about smart goals, we're going to talk about, matter of fact, let me pull up that workbook one more time. What are SMART goals? Specific, measurable. There we go. Specific, measurable. Are they attainable? Are they relevant to what we're hoping to achieve here? And is there a timeliness to it? You know, and setting goals is a very specific action. You know, they can't just say, "Well, I just want to get better." No, well, let's define what better means. You know, let's be very specific about it. Um, how do you measure better? You know, is this a conversion rate? Is it a task per call, dollar per task? Is it a revenue number? You know, there are a lot of different things that are right answers there, but we have to be able to measure goals. Otherwise, it's just a vague dream. You know, are they attainable? You know, and going back to the, I'd love to go to the moon. You know, that would be really a pretty cool goal, but is it really attainable for most of us? I'd say probably not. You know, so we've got to have some of this grounded in reality. Um, and is it relevant to what we hope to achieve? Is it applicable to the place you are in right now in your career? Okay, is it relevant to what you really want to achieve? And again, getting better has to have a deadline on it. When are we going to achieve this? You know, when do we hope to achieve it? So really sitting down with our folks and helping them define what a goal means. Okay. Then we move on to setting the KPIs and set some goals for them. So we're going to start with where we are, you know, and that's again going back to the initial things that we started talking about. What are our KPIs and do we know what our health is? And then looking at those goals and setting those with the individual so that we can set some expectations for when we come back from training. Do we have any questions so far? All right, we'll keep moving. Perfect. And another part of the goals is define the actions that set those goals. Um, I missed that one, but that's an important consideration. So in other words, if we set a goal that we're going to improve our conversion rate, okay, and then we set a metric for that and a timeline and everything, well, that's great. And then we also back up what are the steps that help us achieve that goal. And that could be, well, I'm going to create a summary of findings on every call. I'm going to create 4 to 6 bundled options, or I'm going to use the ABC approach. I'm going to master setting the agenda. Those would be some examples of specific actions that will ultimately feed that goal. Okay, so that's helping the individual see the path. All right. And I know this is a little bit small, but this is straight out of the training process workbook. And there's a questionnaire that walks through, is your calendar free of the training dates? Have I spoken with, and do I have the support of my wife, my family members, or significant others? And what do you hope to get out of this event? List 3 goals or objectives. And why are you a great candidate for this event? You know, this is solid gold because it really verbalizes some of these things. And, you know, we don't want to make assumptions. It's important to get these things out there and have some verbal conversations with them. And this is such an amazing tool that Dan built. Before training, the pre-work plan, let's help them see the path so that they're prepared for this training. You know, we want them to be as knowledgeable about the training they're going to attend as possible before they go there. Try to set them up for success. You know, do we have specific things we want them to watch, read, understand, and what are their takeaways from that? What are the resources do you want to assign there? And if this is a new member that you've onboarded recently, this is really an important step because, you know, going to training can be pretty intimidating for some folks. Now we're going to shift gears and talk about supporting your team during the training event. And so the goal is to really create an experience. So when we go to a training event, and one of the things that we implemented in Nexstar last year, and this was just a huge success, was another best practice that we shared from a member was sending the owner or managers to the event with their team. And so we've created a a way to do that if our training is going to be based in St. Paul, and if there's a couple of other, if you're participating in the financial survey or the monthly PPCs, you can attend this training with your technician or CSR or whatever frontline training that this is, so that you can participate as be there as an observer to support the training that's happening with your team. And this has really been amazingly successful for us, and we, just by having that ownership and that, and we're not there to check on our folks or to be a big brother type of atmosphere, and that's not the vibe that you want to achieve with that, but it's there to support them, and create an immersive experience that's going to be memorable and impactful for them. Okay. And so it starts out in the morning. I would encourage you to do, a 5-5-20 with your team every morning. Review five gratitudes, 5 goals, and 20 of some type of exercise in the morning. The 5-5-20 routine that we teach in service system. That's a fantastic way to start the day with your team. Break bread together. Let's have some breakfast. Let's meet down in the lobby and have breakfast together. And then let's set some expectations for how we want our folks to look, to present themselves. Do you want them to be in clean pressed company uniforms? Do you expect them to be in, nice Dockers and polos? I mean, that's the expectation that you set, because your team is a representation of you. So you want them to look good. And even if you're not with them at that training, these are important things to set that expectation of how you want them to conduct themselves when they're at the training event. And be present. And this is, again, this is a big challenge for you as a manager or an operator. When you're sitting in a class with your team and your phone is blowing up, your instinct is to get up, excuse yourself from the class, and go take those calls. And I realize some of that may need to happen, but it's really something you want to be aware of and something that you want to regulate, because you don't want to get constantly pulling yourself out of that training environment to go answer the phones, because number one, you're not present and you're not getting that much out of the training at that point, but you're also disruptive. So be aware of it and just try to manage that when you're at the training event. Now, let's assume that you're bringing one of the trainers in and you're going to do a private service system training in your location. This stuff still applies. This is still even more important, I would say. And the reason I say that is because when you send somebody away to training, like let's say that they're going to St. Paul for this training experience, they're almost in a retreat type of environment. We try to really create that retreat type environment with these attendees at these events. And sometimes you can lose some of that when you do it in-house, okay? But it doesn't mean you can't create some of the same magic and some of the great things you can do there. At the end of the day, have a dinner, bring these folks together, discuss the ahas and some of those types of things from the day's training. Okay. So even if you're in town or out of town, get together for dinner, make the time, discuss the ahas, the things they learned, and identify some possible obstacles. And you're really going to get some solid gold here too, because sometimes we have this nirvana in our head of how perfect this is all going to be executed, and then sometimes our employees will say, well, wait a second, we don't even have those forms, and this is where the real great information comes from, because sometimes the different perspectives can help you identify obstacles that we might not see. Share company history, vision, goals. Where are we taking this? Why do we do it? What is our motivation? And this is really critical to share with our folks so that they see the vision. We're building something bigger here. This isn't just a job. We don't just fix people's plumbings. I really enjoy helping people. My grandfather started this company. Whatever the company story is, but why is it important to you, and why are they important to you? How do they fit into this? What are we part of here? And these training events are just a fantastic time for you to share the company vision, goals, and who we are, our history, and what we're all about. And of course, show gratitude that they're on the team. Make everybody feel special at these training events, because these are memorable. I look back at training events that I went to 20 years ago, and they're etched in my brain. And they were life-changing events for me, and so you want to create that same magic. This isn't just a service system training or just a call center school to the person that you're sending. This could be a life-changing event, and that's a great way to look at it. All right. Any thoughts or questions so far? We'll linger here for just a moment. All right. Okay, we'll move on. And finally, after the training event, what happens after the training? And this is really all these steps are so important. I keep saying that, but each one of these is really a big deal. Think about when you send a technician to training, or maybe two technicians, and if they come back and it's just kind of like another day, and they come back all excited and enthused about this information that they learned away at training, we want to be able to take that information and capture that enthusiasm in a bottle, bring them into the next service center meeting and let them talk about that experience, because it's infectious. Let's get everybody else excited and try to share as much of that as we can with the team. We need to also have a sit down, a one-on-one. What did they take away from that? If we're not there with them, but they went and they came back and we didn't have the privilege of going with them, but let's sit down, let's talk about this. What did you learn? Show me your notes. If they did the service system video, ask to see it. Let's take a look at your video, because these are things that they're very proud of, and they might not volunteer to show you that, the video of their performance, but if we don't look at it, we don't acknowledge their success and their effort. We didn't validate them. So take the time to do a debrief after this and really share that enthusiasm. We're also going to review the goals that we set before training. Let's dust those off. Let's make sure that those are in focus and review these again. Do you think these goals still fit? And in light of that training, it wouldn't be unusual for that individual to say, I think these are a little conservative now. I'd like to kind of bump these up. I'm going to kill it out there. Beautiful. Let's do it. Let's review these goals. Let's adjust them. Certification. This is a great time to talk about the Service System Certification Program. So now that I'm going to use Service System as an example, if they've gone to Service System, they've checked off one of the big things off that box towards getting certified. So let's help them understand, what is the path? How do I get certified? All right. And we're also going to do a 100-day plan. We're going to talk about that next. Okay. Now, the 100-day plan is a fantastic tool to share with everybody within the organization. But it's certainly, if they're coming back from training, this is the perfect time to really define their development. What are their goals? And really help them see the path. How can we help them achieve those goals? And the 100-day plan can be difficult until you get comfortable with it, because the key initiatives that we're going to focus on the top are achievements, okay? And the most common challenge I see with the 100-day plan is people really kind of get a little bit confused between achievement and actions, right? So the initiatives, accomplishments, or rocks, if you will go on top. Again, goals and achievements have to be measurable, so we're going to assign a metric to those. But the months down below, month 1, 2, and 3, those are the activities that feed those. What are the actions I'm going to take? Okay, and as I mentioned a few minutes ago, if it's conversion rate up here, what are the things I'm going to do? What are the actions that will drive my conversion rate? All right, so helping that individual define those specific actions. I had a question this week, when should the 100-day plan be done? And I would recommend having those things solidified by the first day of the next 100 days. So in other words, if I'm going to use a calendar example, let's say that you do yours January, February, March, for example, a calendar quarter, if you will, then I would have these things nailed down and solidified by January 1st. If you linger out into that 100-day plans, and this is kind of morphing as you go, it's not really set in stone there. So I would suggest taking the discipline to start prepping these before the first day of the next 100 days so that they're nailed down, you've signed off on them, we're all in alignment, and then we post those. We post these in the business. For those of you that have been to Nexstar in St. Paul, every staff member of Nexstar Network has theirs posted in the break room. And that's what we encourage our members to do as well. When your folks do their 100-day plans, post those in your training room, your hallways, or wherever is the appropriate place to be, so that everybody sees those, and the member gets to see their 100-day plan all the time, because it's pretty easy for this thing to fall off the radar screen. So you want to keep this prominent in some place where they can remember it, revisit it, and be proud of it. Do we have any questions? I'll pause there for a moment. Do we have any questions about the 100-day plan? All right, good. Let's see. Sorry, but I don't see the question. Okay. Did I miss it there? All right. And I'll show you one more resource there. During training, a lot of the things we're talking about are all found in that training process workbook. And in the back, you've got some really great examples of how to fill this out. And if you have any challenges, with setting the 100-day plans, and don't feel bad if you do, because they can be kind of difficult. Get with Heath Betts, my counterpart on the east side of the world, or me, and we're happy to help you with your 100-day plans, or help you understand these so that you can help your folks. Okay. But fantastic tool to keep everybody focused. Okay. The question is, do you have any specific items, goals that you like to see on a technician's 100-day plans? Great question, Matt. And we always coach to wherever they are, right? And so the first thing I would look at is, are there any metrics that are pretty glaring that they really need to improve? In other words, if they're below shop average, because we always coach to the shop average. So if the shop average conversion rate is 86%, and the individual that I'm working with here is at consistently in the 60s or 70s, that's probably one of those goals that I'm going to set. So I would look at the shop average and where they fall in on some of those types of things. On this example, getting service system certified. If they're not, hey, that's a great rock to put up there. If there's a metric off their the KPIs that we talk about, like conversion rate, task per call, sold hour efficiency, if you've identified one of those, that would be a great one to put up there. But it really could be anything. One of my favorites is SPPs. SPP sales is always a great one. All right. And let's see, have another great question here. Is there a cross-trained coaching and tracking form for those technicians that perform both heating and plumbing? Great question. No, there is not. And that's kind of a slippery slope. What I typically would recommend is keep them separate. And if you're able to manually put let's say I'm going to use the HVAC and plumbing example. So let's say you have a plumber that runs HVAC and plumbing calls. You could put them on. I would do 2 separate coaching and tracking reports. And if you're able to do the plumbing calls on the plumbing, break them out on a call by call basis. And I know, for some shops that might be realistic, for some that might not be realistic. But I wouldn't necessarily blend the plumbing and the HVAC together for that individual, because it can really be apples and oranges sometimes. So that's a great question. But if you're able to break out this individual's HVAC calls and put them on the HVAC coaching and tracking, great. And then the plumbing calls, put them on the plumbing coaching and tracking report with the other plumbers. So that's really the only way to keep it pure. And same thing with installations. Installations, you just want to exclude their time. Those don't go on there. It's not what the coaching and tracking tool is really designed for. So that's an awesome question. Thank you. All right. Do we have any others? Okay. And I also included a copy of the service system certification form. And again, that can be found on the Training Accountability website. It's also in the training process workbook. But when a technician comes back from service system training, that's the perfect time to light that fire and get them certified. In order to leave those 6 steps, I must lead by example, or as we say in the Navy, lead from the front, right? So if we're doing these things and expecting these things from our teams, they're going to fall in line, you know. But we have to live it, and we have to be the example that we set. All right. So, are there any final closing thoughts or questions? And if not, I think most of you have my email address. I'm easy to find on the website, Jody D at nextstarnetwork.com. If you have questions you don't feel comfortable asking, you know, in the Tap In Live, feel free to pop me an email. I'm happy to share or, you know, talk through anything that you've got. So I'm always here to support our membership, as is Heath on the East Coast, but we're here to support you. That's our live. Oh, I've got one. Perfect. Okay. All right. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. Hope you all enjoyed this. I enjoyed doing these a lot. The next one is going to be December 15th on Friday, December 15th. Heath Betts is going to be handling the next one. We typically kind of trade off on these, so appreciate that. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it. My pleasure. All right. So that's all I've got. Thank you so much for taking the time out today and joining me on this webinar. And have a fantastic weekend and have a fantastic Thanksgiving. Thank you.